Blog Talk Radio.
Namaste, everyone. It's Nature of Reality Radio on March 25th, 2015. This is your host, Andrew Fisher, broadcasting every Wednesday from the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to expose the true and false nature of reality for what it is and what it isn't. We're only going to go for about an hour today because my guest, and by the way, I must say I feel ashamed of myself that I don't actually know how to pronounce her last name. I believe I see her in the queue here. It's 111-111-1111. That's what I see the number there. If that is you, Lynn, I will get you on the air in no later than 5 minutes from now. But I don't know how to pronounce your last name. If it's Kitei, I'd like you to clarify that for me when I let you on the air. I feel ashamed I can't actually pronounce that right. But she is best known for her work regarding the UFOs over Phoenix in March 13th, 1997. That was known as the Phoenix Lights, a big boomerang-shaped UFO. Hard to tell if it was actually different UFOs all aligned or was it one big structure, and it was hard to make out that they were all connected. Well, I guess we'll talk about that on the show today. First thing, though, I'd like to talk about some info about health and medicine because she is an MD, and I'm very familiar with the work of MDs because my mother is an MD, and well, there's a couple of things about MDs that I'd like to get out. I believe it is important to get this out and see what Lynn has to say about this, because when I told my mother about it, she seemed pretty cool about it. And as a matter of fact, Lynn might actually have heard of my mother because she did some news stories in the Philadelphia area, and that's where my mother is very well known as a ophthalmologist in the Philadelphia area. I'm not going to name her name or anything like that. I want to keep her anonymous for the sake of the show and her privacy, but I don't know. We'll talk about MD stuff first, and also then the Phoenix Lights for the most of the show. But first, I'm going to do this on the fly because I've only got like 4 minutes. We're going to do the news, courtesy of Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars. First article: Expert: FBI manipulated crime stats to show increase in mass shootings. I have been reading FBI reports for 30 years, and I have never seen anything like this. To quote the expert. Nothing shocking about the FBI manipulating stats. You know, the government lies so much; it's incredible. In fact, says there's a news story here that's not actually on the featured articles, but up here at the top it says Newtown destroys suspected Sandy Hook shooter's home. Adam Lanza, like Sandy Hook, we all know was a false flag to justify taking our guns, and now they're destroying his home. Makes you wonder if they got something to hide there. The government, of course, the government has something to hide. I mean, the government actually told us in its stats, FBI stats, that nobody died in Newtown during the Sandy Hook shooting. So I guess it's okay for us to say nobody died at Sandy Hook, but it was the government that told us that, and since the government lies so much, it's impossible to know if even that's the truth, that nobody died. But, okay, whatever. I'm just going to move on to the next article here. Real Game of Thrones intro leaked. Popular show reveals truth behind world agenda. Yes, I guess it's disclosure in plain sight. The movies, they have a lot of disclosure in plain sight. A lot of the UFOs and the aliens that you see in the movies are real UFOs and real aliens. Famous Star Wars scene in the Mos Eisley Spaceport bar. A lot of those aliens in the bar, it is said, are actually fictionalized versions of real extraterrestrials. Make of that whatever you will. Next article: shock video, car explodes after Border Patrol agent tasers driver. Agents refuse to help as man burns to death. Well, what do you expect? It's Border Patrol. I mean, our courts have ruled that we don't have any rights at the border. That's bullcrap because rights are inalienable. It doesn't matter what country you live in. All your rights are inalienable, but that's what the courts ruled because the courts want to be tyrannical. So those Border Patrol agents are going to really hassle you if you try to exercise your right to travel and try to assert your rights. Just be prepared for that if you try doing that at the border. All right, next article. TSA allows convicted bomber through expedited screening. Agency accepts convicted terrorist Sarah Jane Olsen into the pre-check program. Well, that shouldn't come as too much of an astonishment considering that, there was this TSA agent who worked at a Rhode Island airport who called into the Alex Jones show and said that the TSA is actually trying to hire criminals to intimidate the passengers. And, well, they found out who that guy was because there's only one airport in Rhode Island, and he made the mistake of saying he was at a Rhode Island airport, so it wasn't too hard for them to figure him out. And he probably heard it for that. Don't know if he lost his job, but yeah, so that shouldn't come as an astonishment that they would let bad guys through the screening, just like they allowed the underwear bomber through the security. Just ask Kurt Haskell; he could tell you all about that one, how it was a staged event. Next article: Tunisia gunmen trained by CIA and Gulf Emirates jihadists in Libya. Once again, the CIA and Gulf Emirates are behind headline terror. Yes, the United Arab Emirates. They're also one of our allies, involved with the fact that the U.S. government publicly runs Al-Qaeda, and the CIA, of course, runs Al-Qaeda. And when they were trying to take over Libya. It was all a false flag, all a planned thing to get out Gaddafi to let the globalists control the banks there and everything. Our next article, feminists ban clapping because it triggers anxiety. Major women's group urges conference attendees to use jazz hands instead. Oh yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It's not supposed to ban clapping because it triggers anxiety. That's the nanny state for you. Don't let them control us, folks. Don't tolerate this kind of behavior. They're just trying to control our lives more. Our next article, very going to do this quickly, only this one more article after this one. Apple wants you to get accustomed to real-time tracking tech complements ongoing and evolving surveillance by the NSA. Yes, the surveillance system of the NSA, nothing to do with safety, everything to do with controlling us and blackmailing people by scrutinizing what they did to discredit them and all that other stuff. And Apple is a corporation that's well involved with the NSA surveillance program, as people like Edward Snowden have exposed. All right, one last article here. Mocking the obese should be illegal, says expert. Should all speech and humor that hurts someone's feelings be banned? Well, hurtful speech is not free speech because it can cause emotional harm, and you don't have the right to harm people. So free speech does not apply to something like that, but depends on how you mock them, I guess. So, all right, let's just leave it at that. I got more important things to talk about now. Lynne Kitei, you are on the air. Is this you?
That is me, and you just pronounced it correctly, Kitei, like a key and a tie.
All right, thank you for
In fact,
for
you mentioned that your mom is an ophthalmologist, and we actually have cousins in Allentown, brothers who are ophthalmologists. So it's all in the family. And I'm from Philadelphia originally, born and raised in Philadelphia and Alchemist Park. Graduated Cheltenham High School in '66 and Temple University in '70, and medical school, Temple Medical School in '74, and Medical College of Pennsylvania was my postgraduate work. So I spent a lot of time in Philadelphia and moved to Phoenix in 1980.
Okay, so yeah, I'm sorry. I'm always going to put myself on mute whenever you're talking, so there isn't any breathing or echo through the mic. Okay, but before we start talking about the Phoenix Lights, it only makes sense to pay tribute to your work as an MD. But it's a tough question or a tough subject to discuss with you, but I think it's fair. The fact is, MDs, they're only trained to treat the symptoms, not the causes, and
that's not necessarily true. That might have been one day, but it depends on the physician. And I have to say, even since medical school in the 70s, I've always been into preventative care, particularly when I got pregnant in '73, and I've been doing that ever since. In fact, after the mass sighting, and for anybody listening that has no clue of what the Arizona mass sighting was, and it wasn't just Phoenix, by the way, it was not only Arizona, but New Mexico, California, Nevada, and I have to say that it was for many, many hours. There's a lot of mis and disinformation out there. That was one of the reasons that I was really compelled to come forward after 7 years of anonymity, after thousands of people, over 10,000 people, saw what I had been seeing actually for 2 years prior to the mass sighting. My husband, who's also a physician, also born and raised in Philly, in Mount Airy, had a very close sighting to our home 2 years before the mass sighting. And I actually got 35 millimeter pictures of these orbs. They're objects, oval objects in a pyramid formation right outside our bedroom window, and wondered what this advanced technology was doing, not only outside our window, but I had no idea that we had this type of advanced technology here on Earth, and wondered what it was for 2 years until they came back 2 months before the mass sighting. And this is really important data, I have to say, Andrew, because if anybody is near a computer or can get on the Phoenix Lights Network website, www.thephoenixlights.net, and can go on the photo page, I have a very unique collection of these anomalous aerial phenomena that I've been collecting since 1995 that have been analyzed and authenticated meticulously by university and military optical physicists and experts, and to this date cannot be explained. They are true unknowns. That's another reason I just couldn't stick them in a drawer. And you asked about my medical training. During medical school, actually, I was going into the into the areas near St. Chris Hospital, Broad and Lehigh, which the homes were all boarded up. I couldn't believe people were living there. And because I asked the head of pediatrics what happens to kids that don't get immunizations or examinations, and he said they don't. And I said, well, if they're not coming to you, why aren't you going to them? And this is while I was a junior at Temple Medical School, and they said, wow, that's a really good idea. And we actually got together a course that we had a doctor and a nurse and a student. Myself first went into these neighborhoods, and that really gave me the idea. Sitting in a home that was just squalor. I mean, I could not believe that there were 9 kids running around. Nobody had ever been examined. They had no furniture, one light bulb, but they had their TV in the living room, and it was on. And I thought, how do you reach these people? How do you wake them up to the reality of getting medical care and taking care of themselves? And lo and behold, the news came on, and I thought, oh, that's a good idea. And it kind of wandered in my brain for a couple years. And when I was in my residency, I actually went to NBC with the idea, KYW there, and they were doing a women's medical week in 2 weeks. And Jessica Savage, I don't know if you remember that name, she was actually my mentor. I worked with her, and we did an unbelievable week where it was so groundbreaking because there was so much not being shown on TV, and we simulated a gynecological examination and so forth, that they asked me to stay on, and I started doing health tips with Mort Krim and Vince Leonard, and before I knew it, I was doing a syndication. When we moved here in 1980 to Phoenix, the syndication was actually being shown at the CBS affiliate, and NBC asked me to do health programs for them in the early 80s, and then I did work for USA Cable, and I was also seeing kids in the practice drowning in substance abuse, and I am getting to the point, and wanted to do something to really wake them up to the reality of substance abuse, and got kids that had been there, experts in the field, and then I brought in my other hat, because before I went to medical school, I was in musical theater, professional musical theater. I toured with Gordon McRae in Oklahoma and Betty Grable in Guys and Dolls, and understudied Barbara Eden in Sound of Music at the music fair. You've probably been there, or your parents have been there, and kind of combine that using the poignant words of celebrities, and produced our first video called Drugs Don't Make It, and was so successful that I was asked to do other topics, and ended up actually forming my own company, Health Education Learning Programs, to produce video and workbook curriculums on the reality of vital health issues, AIDS, teen pregnancy, and substance abuse, that are currently being distributed by Discovery Education. At any rate, having that background, when this fell in my lap, and I knew nothing about this topic at all, nothing, and had no interest, and here I have incredible 35-millimeter documentation of something that's not only went throughout the state and beyond, but was happening worldwide. And I had to educate myself first before I could educate others. And 2 months before the mass sighting was the first time I saw them, but at a distance after 95. And here we're talking about a mile-wide formation, equidistantly placed formation of lights, orbs, balls of light, that it was just so unnerving and amazing. In fact, the first picture of that series, I was shaking, and you can see it in the picture, that I caught 6 pictures in a row of this phenomena, this mile-wide phenomena that thousands would see 2 months later throughout the state and beyond, head-on, turning into a V-shape. And I have to tell you, I didn't sleep well that night, because not having an explanation for the 95 close sighting, it was like, whoa, what is this, a mothership or a fleet or something? I mean, it was just that unusual. And I called around, found air traffic controllers the next morning who saw the same thing at the same time at Sky Harbor International Airport, and they were very forthcoming initially. And they were alarmed because it popped up right over Class B restricted airspace. That's a 30-mile radius around the center of the airport. Anyone that goes into that airspace, particularly 1,000 feet altitude as these were, must call into the tower, and no one did. So they immediately looked on radar, did not show up on radar, took their binoculars to look, and what they described were 6 points of light, totally equidistant from each other, massive span over a mile wide that seemed to be attached to something, but they couldn't quite see what it was attached to. And you would hear this again over and over and over again by people 2 months later, thousands of people throughout the state. And it turned, one of them was a meteorologist, and said it turned as a unit against the wind and then elevated slowly and moved behind South Mountain, which is just south of the airport. So when I said, so what was it? There was silence. And then one of them says, beats me. I said, you're air traffic controllers. You're supposed to know it's in our airspace, and you don't know what these were. They had no clue. They ruled out every conventional aircraft, balloons, blimps, flares, even skydivers with holding lights. I mean, they ruled out everything that was logical. Okay, and we kept in contact. I continued photographing these things up until and including March 13th, 1997. Now, again, for anybody that doesn't know the story out there, on March 13th, while thousands of people were looking skyward purposely to see a glimpse of the Hale-Bopp comet, they also caught a glimpse of these 1 to 2 mile wide, not only these orbs that seemed to be attached to something in a V shape, it just went right past them. But many people saw craft, actual craft, and there were 9 or 10 different craft. There was a 12-year compilation by from thousands of reports by the investigators from the National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle, Washington, from Village Labs, which is a computer lab here that was the clearinghouse for all the reports, as well as Arizona MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, as well as Councilwoman Vice Mayor Frances Barwood, who was the only elected official in May who asked, because so many of her constituents were asking her to do something, because it went right over their heads. I mean, we're talking rooftop level, silent, totally silent. Some people saw it take off at blink speed without even displacing the air. Other people saw these orbs detach from the main craft, go out into the environment, and then redock with it. And they saw gunmetal underneath. Some people saw windows. I mean, we're talking incredible technology. And we're also talking many, many hours, not 1 or 2 hours as the media or the debunkers would have you believe. Yes, the bulk of reports came in between 8 and 10, because that's when most people were outside looking up at the Hale-Bopp comet. But it started actually on March 13th, started weeks before, and there were other people seeing these things as I was and documenting them on film as well. But on March 13th, it actually started at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. There were daylight sightings of these phenomena. At 5:30, they were seen by Native Americans in New Mexico, 7 o'clock hour in California. At 11 o'clock or so, there was actually 2 commercial airlines with like 140 passengers and crew that saw it cover Las Vegas, and that's a whole story in itself that I get into in the book, because things happened after they reported it, and it continued through the night. In fact, at 3 a.m. the next day, the 14th, there was a call by an alleged crewman, very detailed. We actually have some of the recorded report in the documentary, that military jets were sent out to intercept one of these craft that was hovering right over the center of Phoenix, 7th Avenue and Indian School, for anyone that knows the Phoenix area. And as they approached, about a mile away, the lights started to dim. And as they got closer, the whole thing just blinked out and disappeared. And the crewman, and he was very sincere and very detailed, said that he was one of the people to help one of his pilots out of his craft because he was so shaken up by it. So there was a lot of stuff happening. And then 5:30 the next morning, there's actually a report by a Boeing crew that was coming into work at Sky Harbor International Airport, saw one of these craft hovering over their tarmac. So there were many things happening, and for many, many hours. In fact, again, if you go on the website, which is just packed with information, and go to the GAP page, GAP, Geospatial Animation Project, you'll see the 9 or 10 different craft. Larry Lowe illustrated them beautifully, and they're very different. I have to tell you, I mean, some of them, whether it was one craft that could morph into looking differently, or the perspective from where the person was standing, or a parade, which is what they finally concluded after 12 years, because they would not put a craft into this unless it was seen by more than 2 people. And when you look at these, they're very, very different. I mean, one of them splits in two. Another one, which blew me away when I first saw it, in my inquiry, because I pushed my whole medical career aside for 7 years to try to find a logical explanation, which I have yet to find, by the way. Not only did I find that there was a vast history of these things, which we can talk about, but I also found that 1 month before our mass sighting, where over 10,000 people saw these phenomena, there was a mass sighting over St. Petersburg, Russia, and a couple people got video, and they're exactly two different craft. They're exactly like two of the craft that people saw here. And they also had the experience over the airport, just like ours did with air traffic controllers and some of these objects right over the tarmac there, which is really mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling, and there's a vast history which you can talk about if you like. But as the story unfolded, that's another interesting thing, because I happened to walk in. I don't believe in coincidence anymore. I happened to arrange a meeting with a MUFON investigator. This is how close I was, Andrew, because I knew nothing about this, and I knew no one that was involved to even look at the pictures from 95. But it was getting ridiculous, taking pictures of these things every night. I was running out there to document them, and I'm so happy that I did. But something compelled me to do that, but it was getting a little crazy. I mean, I just had to find out what was going on. And a friend of a friend had a neighbor who had a friend who knew the past president of MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. So I called him up. I said, I have a picture from 95, was the only one that turned out at the time, and there were more later. I know it was authentic, but I'd like someone of credence to take a look at it. And I've been seeing these other lights, and again, he hadn't heard about it, but there were other people that were seeing them too. He refers me to a field investigator for the following Wednesday. I get a call on Tuesday from him that the state director's mom had passed from MUFON, and the funeral was Wednesday. Could we postpone? And the only window of opportunity I had for another 2-3 weeks was Friday morning at 10 o'clock. And he said, fine. Well, I knock on his door with video in hand from the night before of the same exact phenomena that I saw 2 months before when the air traffic controllers saw it too. And the first thing he says to me is, did you see the mass sighting last night? And I said, well, I saw something similar to 2 months ago that I told you about. He said, no, you don't understand. Hundreds, if not thousands of people saw these V-shaped formations of lights, and some people saw craft, and NBC was coming to interview him in a half an hour. I said, whoa, I'm out of here. They might recognize me because I did the health reporting in the early 80s here at NBC. I said, I don't know what we're talking about, if this is military or a hoax or whatever, but it's not about me. And I have to tell you, Andrew, it has never been about me. It's about the data. And I did not want to come forward, but, I had to set the record straight ultimately after 7 years of anonymity. But at that point, I said, take a copy of the video, let people see what we saw. I don't know what it is, but it is. And I'm out of here. And I left. Well, by 4:30, the first news came on at 4:30 that next day. My video was on every news station. It was really exciting that people were seeing what we saw. And then I'm hearing that so many thousands of people saw this. And by 9 o'clock news, a couple other wonderful, amazing videos came out. One is an arrowhead with 5 lights. I mean, you can see those lights are either attached to something or have a force field holding them in rock-solid formation. And that one and mine were shot before 10 o'clock. After 10 o'clock, there were 2 boomerangs. One is really, really impressive, a giant boomerang, and the other is a little haphazard, so it may be flares that the military professes that they sent off 5 months after the fact, and only after, because there was no investigation, no explanation for months, until a USA Today article came out June 18th, 1997. And it was a front-page article that really announced our sighting to the world. And we were deluged by media from all over the world. And they too, when they talked to the witnesses, their descriptions were so detailed and so heartfelt. I mean, some people said they could have thrown a rock at this thing. It was so close. Others were right underneath these giant wells, they would call them, or canisters of spinning energy. And they said, why isn't there an investigation? Why isn't there an explanation, even a public safety issue? And suddenly, the very next day, and I don't know if you've seen this, but the very next day, our former governor, Fife Symington, all of a sudden, out of the blue, calls a press conference that afternoon, this was June 19th, to announce the culprit of the lights over Phoenix. And again, it was much more far-reaching than just Phoenix, but this was his call. And everyone took it seriously. And reporters were there and witnesses were there, and he marches out, one of his aides, with a giant alien head costume and made a mockery of the whole thing, which really was very disconcerting, particularly with parents that were with children that saw this go right over them, and he's making fun of this. Well, I have to say that put a lid on it for a month, and they must have been scrambling because the only hard evidence that they had were the videos, the handful of videos. People did, first of all, we didn't have cell phones with cameras at the time. People asked why weren't there more pictures, because we had the clunky cell phones at the time, and who carries around their camera, okay? But there were a few people that did try to take a picture of the mile-wide triangle craft, and it was black. It blocked out the stars, and they just turned out black. So there were just a handful of videos that they couldn't just blow off. They had to explain it in some way, and the video doesn't do it justice. The videos, these lights are much smaller, they flicker, they're white, and could be mistaken for flares, I guess. Whoever thought of it was brilliant. But the formations, if you really look at the video of the two unknowns, are really compelling. Flares can't do that. And at any rate, a month after the USA Today article in July 24th, I get a call because I had checked with every military base. I really tried to do my homework, and they were just as curious as we were. I have some of their conversations in the book. It's pretty comical. But anyway, I get a call from one of the heads of PR at the Air National Guard, and she says, Dr. Lynne, I think we know what those lights were back in March. And I was thrilled. I said, you do? She said, yeah, do you believe that nobody ever looks, in 5 months, nobody ever looked at the log for visiting Air National Guard? And the Maryland Air National Guard was in town sending off flares in Operation Snowbird, LU-2 military illumination flares. And that must be what some people saw. And I learned later that Snowbird means diversionary tactical maneuvers. So obviously it's been a diversion ever since. But at any rate, I said to her, I said, well, when was the Maryland Air National Guard in town? She said, March 1st to the 15th. I said, were they in town in January? She said, oh, no. I said, are you sure? She said, absolutely not. I said, well, I have 35-millimeter photographs of the same exact phenomena in the same exact location, confirmed the morning after in January and the morning after the mass sighting by air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport is hovering over Class B restricted airspace at 1,000 feet altitude. And she says, you never told me that. And then I said, besides, you're trying to tell me that flares, and by then I had educated myself to anything logical, including military flares, that drop from parachutes, they have parachutes connected to them, that drift haphazardly with the wind, have huge smoke trails, and we're talking within minutes they drop to the ground, and they're supposed to illuminate the area around it, which, by the way, not one person has described flare characteristics in 18 years. But anyway, you're trying to tell me that flares that cannot keep a formation traverse the entire state for hours in a rock-solid, equidistantly spaced, mile-wide V? And she says, I have a call coming in. I'll get back to you. Well, I'm still waiting.
Yeah, thanks. Just want to touch on Governor Fife Symington for a moment. He did actually say he had a UFO sighting and he wasn't going to tell anyone until long after the fact, but he did come forward about it. Could you specifically tell us what Fife Symington said he saw?
Well, sure. It was interesting as the story progressed, and I just took a breath. Thank you for that. But as the story progressed, after they came out with the flare thing, it was really heartbreaking because, the people that saw these phenomena knew in their hearts and hearts it definitely wasn't flares. Although, hey, you know what? I knew that I had pictures not only during the mass sighting, 2 months before the mass sighting, and when we went back and analyzed the pictures from 2 years before the mass sighting, the close sighting, and if you go on the photo page, you'll see it's right there. It's 35 millimeter. It's in the negatives. The same exact phenomena was in the background. in the same exact location, disappearing when we were so focused on the close orb. So I have documentation that showed, and now I have more, but showed at the time that it happened at least 3 times. So whoever did this did it multiple times. If the military did it, which shame on them, I mean, public safety issue and all that, and certainly, doing that above people's heads isn't very cool, and then denying it. But at any rate, do it again. And Frances Barwood, the vice mayor and councilwoman at the time, actually ran for Secretary of State on a platform to get answers about the Phoenix Lights. And one of the things she was really pushing for, and this was 2000, this was 3 years later, was a reenactment, which would be very cool. If the military did it, fine. Well, we get an announcement right before the third anniversary that 3 Air National Guards, this is March 7th, 2000, were coming into town to show everybody the Phoenix Lights. Now, whether they thought they were going to confuse the issue or put it to rest or whatever, I don't know. But let me tell you something. It was nothing like the true unknowns. In fact, if you go on the Phoenix Lights Network website and go to the news page and go halfway down, there's one block that is a CNN affiliate here, our AZ Family 3. They did a wonderful report showing the footage from that night. They tried to make a triangle. It was upside down. It fell apart immediately. One of the lights just flickered out like almost within seconds. It had huge smoke trails. I mean, it just confirmed for all the witnesses that what we saw was definitely not flares. And I have to say that to this day it has never been recreated or explained, but is appearing worldwide, and we can get into that. But on the 10th anniversary, it was very interesting, right before the 10th anniversary, for whatever reason. And we see flares. We live mountainside. We're pretty high in the mountain and have a panoramic view of the city skyline. That's why we know what planes and helicopters and street lights and car lights look like. And these other lights were quite different than that, and they were right outside our bedroom window, a little below us, actually. But 10 years later, it was interesting that suddenly I see a line right before the anniversary celebration, and people talk about it here every year. It's an amazing event, to tell you the truth. We just had a sold-out house for the 10th year at the Scottsdale Harkin Shea Theater. We do a anniversary celebration event each year showing the documentary. We had our world premiere there in 2005, and every year it is just packed, and it's just a wonderful event. But anyway, right before the 10th anniversary, I see a line of flares, and my eye is trained now, and I can see that they're haphazard within seconds through the viewfinder of my camera. I could see smoke trails. The next morning, I started getting calls off the hook. Oh, Dr. Kitei, did you hear about the sighting last night? I said, don't get so excited. It was flares, but I said, now is the perfect time, coming from my education background. Now is the perfect time to educate the public on the difference between flares and the true unknowns, which they did. They did some wonderful reports. Well, a couple of weeks later, actually days later, I think it was March 18th, and March 13th was the anniversary, we get an announcement that former Governor Symington divulged that he actually saw one of these mile-wide craft, and in his own words, as a pilot and military, it was otherworldly. And I have to tell you that any credible person coming forward, and that was one of the reasons that I did come forward ultimately. I went back to work. I had a 750-page journal 4 years later, and I went back to work to help put our younger son through medical school. He's a neurologist now, and pared down the book and edited it down to the best of what I found while I was at the Arizona Heart Institute Wellness and Imaging Center. We bring that back again because I've always been involved with preventative medicine, the heart tests and so forth, and finally came forward with the book. But at any rate, we've come full circle, because when I did come forward in 2004, the official and accepted explanation of the Phoenix Lights was that it was merely military illumination flares. Well, now with social media and with getting the word out there and coming forward, if I can be a credible voice so people actually look at the data, then I've done my job. And with more credible people, such as the former governor, he was an elected official, which is like unheard of for somebody in his position to come forward to say that he actually saw something that was out of our reality, really took it up a notch and really, to his credit, got it out there even in a bigger way, to where now people worldwide, I have to tell you, just go on YouTube and plug in Phoenix Lights. It's amazing. From all different countries, we'll look up at the sky now and see these orbs or these V or triangle craft and say, wow, look, there's the Phoenix Lights. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, a couple of questions I'd like to ask on whether or not you feel it would be valid to use what I'm about to suggest to determine what those UFOs actually are. One of my previous interviews was with a ET contactee named Ray Kusalandich, and a lot of people would be skeptical of things ET contactees say, but in a booklet of drawings that he had someone who knew how to draw make for him, he actually showed different ET races and the specific shapes and colors and designs of the specific UFOs that those specific races used. And looking at some of those pictures on the GAP page on your site, I don't know for sure if any of the ones that he showed were of the designs that were of those UFOs. But now that I've told you this, do you feel that maybe it might not be a bad idea to use ET contactees as a source to determine what these UFOs are?
Okay. First of all, personally, and I've been studying this intensively for 18 years now, I don't know what they were, but I know that they are. And it's time we get this topic out in the open and we address it, we accept it, and we study it so we can find out who's driving these things, as well as move forward in our own evolution. There's lots of rumors flying out there. I'm a healthy skeptic. I don't feed into them. I've got to see it to believe it. And I've seen it. I've seen it and I've experienced it, and certainly I've been inspired for some reason to do what I'm doing and push my medical career aside, although I have to say I haven't left medicine. I am doing it every day. There are people that contact me, and I urge people to contact me as a scientist and as an educator, and certainly as a physician and experiencer myself. I know how important it is to share. When somebody has an experience, although I have to say that most anomalies can be explained, only a small percentage cannot. But just because we don't have the technology yet to definitively define what these things are, it doesn't mean they're not real. We may just be looking on the AM dial for an FM frequency. So it's really important for people to share. It's very healing, even if it's with one person. And I have over 30,000 emails from people, and we have a wonderful Facebook page called Phoenix Lights Network. You're welcome to join us there. I post things, at least weekly, as well as, message me and just tell me your own story. So many people are afraid because of the ridicule and the snickering, and it's enough. It's like enough. Something is definitely going on, okay, and has been since human documentation started. That's what blew me away 6 months before the mass sighting, and I want to share this because it really put a new light on some of this, not only the data, but the whole history of this. As I mentioned, South Mountain is right south of the airport, and some miles back is the Estrella mountain range. And in between those two mountain range, and there's one point where they intersect, and there's a picture on the photo page, the first picture that shows the topography, and you can see South Mountain on the left, and Estrella is a little further back on the right. And I also have a car there on the street, and you can see how the lights of a car reflect onto the street, unlike the true unknowns, which are self-contained light. That's why we call them an orb. But at any rate, I was invited to present my substance abuse program at the Gila Bend Indian Reservation, which is very sacred ground in between those two mountain ranges, 6 months before the mass sighting. And they don't talk to outsiders, but I got friendly with them and helped them out. And after the mass sighting, I noticed, and again, the data speaks for itself. Just look at it. You can see in the pictures over and over again, these phenomena keep popping up right there where South Mountain and the Estrellas intersect, right where their sacred ground is. So I gave them a call. And I said, did anybody happen to see strange lights on March 13th? And they started to giggle. And I said, is that funny? And they said, are you kidding? We've been looking up at them for centuries. We call them sky people, light beings. It's part of their culture. I had no idea. That was the first time I had heard of it. Not only did they tell me and show me their petroglyphs etched out in the mountains, centuries old, that are identical to what my husband and I saw outside our window, the triangle of three orbs. There's also a boomerang that's etched out there, and some people have tried to debunk that as being, the moon cycles, but they're all uniform. They're not cycles of the moon, okay? They're in a boomerang shape. Also, they told me that the estrellas, meaning star in Spanish, was given that name because of the history of these phenomena in that area, and they believe that it's a gateway to the stars, that there's actually a portal or gateway in that area. And again, if you look at my pictures, and I'm not saying there definitely is, that is there. I'm not trying to convince anybody, but these phenomena keep popping up in that area. So perhaps there is. But at any rate, I started looking into this aspect and not only found out that since the beginning of human documentation, these phenomena have been around and have been noted, not only on primitive walls of they have long extinct animals etched, they also have these UFOs in the sky. How did they know that unless they had experienced it? Or the Sumerian writings and the India writings all over the world, the same phenomena are being described, and even in the Bible, Ezekiel's wheel. And in the 15th and 16th centuries, there's drawings and paintings of people on the ground with a UFO, with even beings in the UFO in the sky. It's so fascinating when you really look at the history. In fact, 100 years, almost to the day, of the mass sighting in 1897, there was what was described in Kansas, California, Washington, and Canada, a giant airship with removable lights. Now, when I read that in a Kansas Tribune or whatever, that's almost identical to what happened here. People saw these lights detach from the main craft and go out into the environment and redock with it later. And by the way, that was 6 years before the Wright brothers took flight. So these things have been around for many, many centuries. And then we have the Lubbock lights as well as the Hudson Valley sightings that are similar. And in the 80s and 90s, we have UK and Belgium. In fact, Belgium is a model for what should happen. They actually, when they were having their sightings of these phenomena, they not only got the military and the civilians and the universities together and scientists to try to decipher what these phenomena were. And that's what should happen. That's what should happen here. But at any rate, we're getting closer to that, hopefully, and that's why I say science really needs to step up and start investigating these seriously, because something's going on. Anomalous phenomena have been around World War II. In fact, we just had the speakers at our big event last weekend for the 18th anniversary, and one of the speakers was a 93-year-old French pilot, World War II French pilot, who saw the same exact orbs around his plane. They were called Foo Fighters during World War II. And not only did he tell a story about seeing them and what happened when he tried to report them, which wasn't pretty, and that's been happening to pilots for decades. They're threatened with their careers. But he also admitted that he's been communicating with these beings since World War II, which is really fascinating. So, there's a lot more to this story, and I hope people actually read the book, because I not only get into the rest of the story, the Phoenix Lights inside story, but one of the other interesting aspects of this that I just want to mention before we finish today, because to me it's one of the most important, is number one, there's not been one in 18 years, not one report of harm, threat, or abduction associated with the Phoenix Lights. And then we're talking worldwide, okay? And I can't speak for other things, but I can speak for the Phoenix Lights. And what was amazing to me at the time is that there were a number of witnesses who shared with me that they had had near-death experiences as children that was reawakened by the mass sighting. And that really blew me away, because I did too. And I'm not going to, we don't have time to get into my near-death experience, and I hope people pick up the book, because I lay it all out there. And I was 8 years old, and it changed my life forever. And perhaps it was the foundation for all, I don't know, that's going on. People can decide for themselves. But the point is that when I thought that, whoa, is it possible there could be a connection between all unexplained phenomena, whether it's a near-death experience, out-of-body experience, or unexplained aerial phenomena that has a mystical light associated with the experience? And lo and behold, I have to tell you, once I started looking again, I started finding such credible data at university level. The Omega Project, if anybody wants to pick up that 4-inch book, they're welcome to, by Dr. Kenneth Ring, or Dr. Bruce Grayson, who is a NDE authority, or Dr. Raymond Fowler, who really got into the Andreessen case, which is a very interesting case as well. And such credible data that not only shows that the experience itself, whatever the unexplained phenomena is very similar. I lay out very simply in the book. But the biggest impact is the after effect. And we're talking not only in long term, but in real time, which I'll tell you in a second. But what I was seeing with the mass sighting, and with what I was studying of the connection and the awakening, the enlightenment, the positive transformation that took place within an individual that had an unexplained phenomena experience, was so profound, so important, life-changing, that I started calling all unexplained phenomena UP and up, because it is an up. The person is never the same. The person that experiences an up, and you don't even have to have an up experience to have this positive transformation. All you need to do is open your mind and your heart and learn about it. And I urge people to read the book, because it's helped people transform to that really positive, good place, which I didn't even realize before the book came out and people started telling me. But a connectiveness to the universe and to the earth and to each other that is so powerful and to the core, that it changes people forever. I mean, there's people that went into the peace movement, there's people that went into the environmental movement, changed their eating habits, and they won't eat meat anymore. I mean, I'm talking a real positive transformation, and it is what it is, and that aspect alone I found very interesting, and not only long term, but during the mass sighting itself, which is really poignant, okay? Because 6 months before the mass sighting, the movie Independence Day was really popular, and we are so inundated. We talk about this in the documentary. We are so inundated with threat, and harm, and even Dr. Gary Schwartz, who's the head of the Consciousness Study Department and Psychiatry at the University of Arizona, states in the documentary, if you're afraid of something, how do you think you're going to feel when you see something that you're afraid of, okay? Well, initially, the kids were jumping up and down as they see this mile-wide V formation coming towards them, Independence Day, Independence Day. But as it got closer, a calmness took over everyone, not only children, but adults as well, a connectiveness to the phenomena. Some people even got telepathic messages. And as it passed over, the kids wanted to run after it or get their parents in the car and chase it. I mean, that does not happen with blimps or balloons or flares, okay? So something really, really extraordinary happened here. And more people worldwide, I travel the world now talking about it, are learning about the Phoenix Lights and really accepting the fact that something passed over Arizona and that wanted to be seen, not only to wake us up to their presence in a very gentle, non-threatening way, but also to wake us up to who we are as human beings and the positive potential we have. So many people have been touched at that deep level. It's really important to share.
Yeah, thanks. So in regards to these UFOs, talking about how they might belong to the military, in my interview with Stan Freeman, he said again something that has caused quite controversy. One of the few controversial things, well, a lot of things Stan says is controversial, but this seems to take the cake among the things that a lot of the UFOs that belong to the government don't actually belong to the military, and the excuse he always gives is if the UFOs belong to the military, they they would have used it in the wars. Well, I mean, you did give one example of that, the Foo Fighters, but he's like, well, that's like the only exception. But people like John Lear, Bill Burns, and John Ventry, I had all three of them on my show. They all said the reason we didn't use them in the wars is because we didn't have to, because there was less sophisticated technology everywhere that we could easily use that without having to get the UFOs out, not to mention the powers that be were manipulating both sides of the wars. So if the side they didn't want to win wanted to use UFOs, they would prevent that from happening. But I'm guessing you do subscribe to the idea that UFOs belong to the military, and the reason we didn't use them in the wars is, like I said, because we didn't have to. Would you agree with that?
Well, actually, after World War II, both the United States and Germany and Japan tried to investigate these Foo Fighters, these orbs, and nobody could find out what they were. Everybody thought they were spy technology from somebody else, but they never found out who had them. And, as far as where they come from, if I hadn't seen it up close and personal, which just doesn't make sense that it would be military, okay? Why would it be outside our bedroom window? It just doesn't make sense at all. And as far as being military UFOs in the 50s and the 60s, I can feed into that. I mean, I wouldn't doubt that they were, trying to confuse the issue and had some of their own craft flying around that they didn't want people to know about. And, if they thought they were UFOs, that was okay with the military. But there's so many rumors flying around. Besides, Stanton, Richard Dolan, who is a very learned historian, feels that there is a runaway society, that there is another society above our society who is really controlling a lot of what we see and a lot of what's going on, and including the UFO phenomena and what we hear and what we're supposed to learn. And other people think that it's actually the ETs that are controlling it. You know what, Andrew? I don't know, and it doesn't matter to me. I don't even go there. I'm working at a grassroots level as a scientist and an educator and a physician to try to educate, raise awareness, and to let people know that what happened here, and again, I can't speak for other things, but the Phoenix Lights and phenomena like them are benevolent, and that there just is no evidence otherwise, and that something has been here since human documentation began that might be watching us. I mean, we know about the watchers that are in the Bible and in other ancient writings, these men in white robes that people see actually when they have near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and contact that, might very well be the same beings that were seen in ancient times. So there's a lot going on, I have to tell you, and it's complicated. It is definitely complicated. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the things that are flying around are military or above the military. That there might even be, private enterprises out there that are doing things that, we don't have control over. So, and all of the above. But I have to say from my own experience, and again, I urge people to read the book because I get into this a lot more, not only my own experience, but the different possibilities of time travelers, interstellar, intrastellar. Whatever I saw was interdimensional. So whoever's doing this, wherever they're from, is an interdimensional situation. And I'm actually sharing for the first time in the latest edition in the book something I never thought I would ever share. In 98, there was another sighting here. In fact, we have video of it in the documentary. It's spectacular. Straight lines and mirror images, 40 miles wide, a 20-minute array. The final thing is a giant pyramid of 3 lights. I mean, just unbelievable. And we got 4 of us, north, south, east, and west, to capture it. And I was told by Linda Moulton Howe, if you know her name, very few people knew who I was, but I had met her in Philadelphia, actually, when she was living there at the time, and showed her my data, and she had referred me to a Navy optical physicist, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, very well respected in the field. And I finally got in touch with him, and I said, I have this video, and I'm going to stick a couple of pictures in, the first and last picture, which by then I had more pictures than I even thought I did, of the close sighting, and, I'd really like you to tell me what they are. So a couple of weeks later, he calls me up and he says, Dr. Lynne, you told me that sighting you had in 95 was only a few minutes long. I said, that's right. He said, ask your husband. Now, this was poignant because for me, and I was out on the balcony taking the pictures. He was inside. For me, it was wondrous and amazing, and it was like, it blew me away. The whole thing was amazing. He wouldn't talk about it. Everybody comes from a different background, from a different upbringing, from a different worldview. Some people can't deal with this topic. Some people don't want to deal with this topic, and that's okay. Everyone in their own time. But now with the book and the documentary, there's certainly a plethora of other information out there. It's there if you want to learn and grow. But at any rate, going back to Dr. Maccabee, he said, you have to confirm with your husband. I said, he won't talk about it. He said, well, sit him down and just ask him how long it was, which I did. And this was 3 years later, and he said, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 minutes tops. I go back to Dr. Maccabee. He says, that's impossible. I said, what do you mean? He says, first of all, look at the pictures. And if you look at the pictures on the photo page, I put the first and the last picture there, and his 23-page meticulous report is actually on the website, and part of it is in my book. And anyway, he said the same phenomena is in the background. He was the one that noticed that. I would have never even noticed. I thought it was just part of the landscape. And he said, but that's not the most powerful thing here. He says, look at the skyline. Okay. He said there are many lights, groups of lights that are on in the first picture that are off in the last picture. He said, that doesn't happen in a couple minutes. He said, I'd like you to do an experiment. He said, go out on the balcony, stand approximately where you were standing when you took the pictures of the orbs, and take a picture of the skyline one night every hour, the next night every half hour. I actually did it another night every 15 minutes to see when the lights go out. Now, my husband called me out of a bath to come to one wall of our bedroom as a window to see the lights in the first place in 95. So let's be conservative. I usually take a bath between 7 and 8 when we're home, so let's say 8 o'clock is the starting point. The groups of lights started going out at 9 o'clock. The last picture was indicative of 10:30, 11 o'clock. So he says to me, and I can't make anything out of this, it's okay. He says, can I present this case at the upcoming 1999 MUFON International Symposium in Washington, D.C.? I said, absolutely. This is your baby. You discovered this. I would have never, ever noticed this data. Just keep my name out of it. Please keep me anonymous. And I have to say there was just a handful of people that knew who had these pictures because I was letting them out gratis, but I just did not want to come forward. If I didn't have to come forward at all, I wouldn't have, but ultimately, if I didn't come forward, the data was just going to sit on a shelf. But at any rate, he didn't. He presented it as, and as far as we know, the first and only analyzed and authenticated 35-millimeter photographic evidence of missing time. Now, the reason I share it now, because I kept it totally private, I didn't tell anybody about this for over a dozen years. But number one, it really hit me that there are no coincidences. There are just too many, and you can read them in the book. I mean, it's just one after the other after the other. And I thought, if this data is important, how can I not share this, number one? Number two, time, linear time. Our concept of time is primitive. Past, present, and future is not what time really is. And when I went out on that balcony to shoot the two lower orbs after the top orb had imploded very, very slowly, and after it disappeared mechanically as if there was an intelligence behind it, it felt like it was still there. And when I jumped out on the balcony, there was an eerie silence as if time had stopped. So I've been there, okay, and I also was there in my near-death experience as a child. But time is not what we have our concept of time. That's number two. Number three, quantum physics and quantum mechanics is starting to catch up. Now they're postulating that with string theory and bubble theory that there might be 10 or 11 different dimensions along with ours. Well, if there are other times and spaces along with ours, then why is it such a leap to think that there could be other intelligences in those other times and spaces that we get glimpses of if we're open to them or invited?
Oh, yeah, I fully subscribe to the idea that space and time are illusions and everything exists because our consciousness tells us it exists, just like the movie The Matrix. So if you accept that time is an illusion, then the whole idea of missing time becomes a lot less far-fetched. But just one more question I want to ask before we call it a show. You mentioned the Belgium sightings. A lot of the UFOs that were seen over Belgium do seem to resemble the triangle shapes that are in some of your gap photographs. Just to refresh my memory, when did those Belgian sightings happen? And could you maybe just for a couple minutes touch on them?
Late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
So we're talking, around the same time. And like I said, a month before ours, February 19th, 1997, there was a huge sighting in St. Petersburg, Russia. And a couple people got video. In fact, the one... our documentary, by the way, has won over a dozen international film festival awards, which is unheard of for a documentary, particularly one of the genre. And it's now, and it's evolved. It continues to evolve. And the latest edition and the bonus features are fabulous. We keep adding to the bonus features too. Astronaut Edgar Mitchell is in it. He was actually being conferred with while this was all going on, while in real time, and he is in the documentary. He is absolutely wonderful, and I don't go there. I mentioned it later. I mean, the military and the government, they have a job to do. If there's another government, I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. This is a grassroots level thing that I'm into to help people learn and grow, and just raise awareness about what's going on. And I have to tell you, with the documentary, the last edition, the cover, it blew me away. So when I saw the gap illustrations, the GAP illustrations, and one of them was identical, a V-shaped craft, and each light was 3 lights. I mean, that is so different than anything that you can imagine. With the same video, I have video from St. Petersburg a month before our sighting of the same exact thing. So, these things have been around for a long time. They continue to show themselves worldwide. And now with social media, hooray for social media, because, certainly there's some negatives with people, hoaxing or Photoshop or whatever, which is very sad. But be that as it may, there's also a lot of people out there that are capturing things, in blink speed and sharing them, in real time and letting other people know that things are happening.
All right, thanks a lot, Lynn. So the hour has passed. I guess we'll call this a show, and I'll tell you the same thing I tell all of my guests at the end of every show. Lynn, you are indeed a fascinating individual. I'm glad I met you in MUFON and was able to get you on my show, and I have no doubt that I could easily do another show to discuss UFOs and everything with you. However, one of my goals with this show is to get as many different people on my show as possible before I start giving any one specific guest double dips. And that does mean, I regret to say, I probably won't be asking you to come on my show again, but only because I need to give thousands of other fascinating individuals the chance to have some glory on my show. But this was a great show. Even the stuff about MDs and all was very interesting. Glad you were able to touch on that and also debunk the notion that MDs are only trained to treat the symptoms, not the causes. There is a couple exceptions to that. So I'm glad you pointed that out. I'll spread this interview far and wide, and maybe I'll see you at a future UFO conference.
Well, I appreciate that. By the way, I'm going to be speaking at the Contact in the Desert conference. Have you ever been to one of those? They are fascinating and packed with people. That's going to be the weekend of May 29th to the 31st, and I'm going to be sharing a lot more of the story. There is so much more to the story. I had a 750-page journal that I squeezed down, so there's a lot more to be told, and I hope people will check out the website, thephoenixlights.net, as well as Phoenix Lights Network Facebook page and the Phoenix Lights A Skeptic's Discovery that we are not alone, as well as our documentary, and keep looking up.
I'm sorry to say I won't be able to join you at that conference because I will be going to a Patriot rally to mimic an American Revolution crossing of some sort on May 30th. So I can't join you there, but I do hope a lot of people will buy tickets to that event to see you and the other people there. But Lynn, great having you on. I bid you good day, and I wish you good luck with the rest of your future endeavors and your work. You too. Thanks so much. You keep looking up. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Later. Bye. Bye. So, folks, that is the end of this show. Next week, I will be having Ben Hansen on, and I'm also going to be doing a lot of the show myself. Ben Hansen can only come on for 30 minutes, so for at least another hour after that, maybe another, I'll try to get an hour and a half. I will also be talking about some UFO-related stuff by myself as soon as I bid Ben Hansen good day on that show. So there's an article in in5d.com that I could use to talk about UFOs in regards to that after Ben is let off the air. But that's Ben Hansen next week, and the remaining hour to an hour and a half after him, you'll be listening to me. So that is the end of this show. Namaste, everybody. This is Andrew Fisher signing off on Nature of Reality Radio. Enjoy the rest of your trek throughout infinite consciousness.